strange. But, in the beginning, I even at the very start, even before.
So you said when you moved to Pahrump, so that means, okay, we're getting there, everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Heather.
But let me tell you, even before I entered this world, it wasn't normal. My father is Chinese. He came here from China.
Really?
When he was 9 years old. He came because, there was so much turmoil in China, his whole family wanted to come to the United States. And he had an arranged marriage, a marriage that was arranged for him in China when he was 4 years old and his wife was 3. And so when he's 9 years old, of course, they all come over on the boats, and my father ended up, him and his family, they started Chinese laundry, just like you would imagine, and they all bought Social Security numbers. Sorry, America. They all bought.
There's nothing wrong with that. That's the right way. They're not coming over here to chop our heads off and to take all our nations away from us.
It was a long time ago. I think the audience will forgive my dad, though, in another second because he did give back. He did give back. So anyway, they all bought Social Security numbers and established their family in San Francisco with the Chinese laundry. And when my dad is so old, oh my God. Anyway, he fought in World War II because
he's still around.
Back. He actually snuck in with his purchased identity and made sure he joined the Navy in World War II. So at least he did give back in that way. But my father ended up.
Oh, he got Social Security numbers. Wink, wink. I got you. My bad. I was slow tonight. I had a big day.
He did serve in the military, in the Navy, at least. So, but his family did very, very well. They started small businesses all over California, and he became a very rich man. And in the 70s, he was a rich man, and my dad loves all things American. He loves bacon and eggs. At the time, he loved bell-bottoms and big, long cars, land yachts. He was a little Chinese man with a white suit and a maroon, undershirt with a big collar and the gold chains, and he had a perm.
Yeah, the 70s. Yeah, I gotcha.
And he drove this, Lincoln Continental white with the maroon interior. Like, he really tried to be cool. So anyway.
But he didn't have the pimpy fish boots, right?
I don't think so. No, I think he was wearing loafers or something, if I remember. But then, at the time, my mom was kind of, a hot lady in the 70s. Back in the day, she was discoing, doing the thing, and there's my dad.
Right.
And they met. And so they had me outside of my dad's marriage. My mom had an affair with him, and his wife, my father's wife, never knew that I even existed. That was arranged before I was ever born.
Wow, she's getting deep here, people. All right.
Yeah,
wow.
We're going to make sure that my father's family, because of his honor, they cannot ever find out that he had this other child. And he wanted a son so bad. He wanted a son. He had 4 other daughters. Wanted a son so bad. And then they even told my mom, we think you're going to have a boy. So my dad, rich guy, he bought everything in the world for a baby boy, all powder blue. And I was born and I was a girl. So they had this joke because my father's name was Charles Chu. And they said, we're going to name you Kai if you were a boy, and then everybody would call you Kai Chu.
Oh, man, you would have never heard the end of it.
Yeah, I know. But thank God my mom was a little bit of a hippie, and she said, no, we're going to name her after a flower and all that. But so even before I got to this world, it was weird. And growing up was also very weird. My dad would have to get away. He would tell his family he was going bowling or something. And then he would come over and he would take me out. Our quality time was usually at a restaurant, and then he'd take me to some movie or take me shopping, or, we'd spend a few hours together, and then he'd take me on home, and he just spoiled me, really spoiled me. But my mom's side was a little bit different. It wasn't like dad was there all the time, and my mom was not rich. She did not grow up rich. She grew up in a little tiny town called Knights Ferry. And that was a hard life because my grandfather.
Where was that at? Where was that at again? What'd you say? Knights Ferry?
Knights Ferry. It's a little tiny town. The town is so small, Mars, that it has a stop sign, and it actually says, please stop on the stop sign. Tiny, tiny little town. It's got a covered bridge, cute little Norman Rockwell type place. And
that's cool.
my grandfather came out during the Depression, the Dust Bowl. He came out and he set his roots down in this little tiny town, Knott's Ferry, and worked his tail off. He did anything he could to earn a living. He dug graves at the cemetery. He had a farm. He sold fruit and vegetables that he grew. He earned his living straight from the earth. And that's how my mom grew up. So my mom and my dad come from very different worlds. And my mom was a party girl. Her nickname back in the day was Crazy Susie. She was hot. Where do you think it comes from? It doesn't just come from nowhere. I mean, my mom was really wild, and she liked to run with kind of wild people. I don't say this like it's a bad thing. She ran with some tough guys to protect her. She ran with bikers. She ran with Hell's Angels. She ran with hippies and the kind of unsavory crowd. That's what we had around our house.
She was an adventurer.
All the time. Yeah. And these guys, they would take me 3, 4 years old, put me on the bike, take me for a ride. These big old tough guys. I remember one of them, his name was Foul Val. And,
Foul Valve.
His name was Val and everybody called him Foul Val. So he was this big tough biker dude, beard, exactly what you would imagine. And he was oftentimes my little babysitter. And I'll give you one of the pranks that he pulled on me. This is way before everybody was so concerned about like seatbelts and what happens to children. So I would take a nap in the afternoon and they went fishing one time and I woke up. I had a little 4-poster bed and I woke up and there were fish heads on every post of my bed looking right at me, and I was 5 years old.
Oh, that'd probably freak you out. It's like, what the hell is this?
Well, it was kind of, a little off the chain the way I grew up, and you just kind of get used to it. And I remember, because of the way my mom was, not only did we have a constant stream of people coming in and out of the house, we also would go and just go kind of house hopping around town. We'd go from house to house. Mom would kind of party with people and get a couple drinks, and we'd go to another house and she'd kind of tag me along. This is my mountain kid, man. She goes with me wherever I go.
Aww.
So when I was 4, we went to some Mexican house, because there was a Mexican radio on and the whole house was full of Mexicans. I think it was somebody's birthday is what I think. And Mom brought me over there and she knew, I think she knew the grandfather or something, and was just showing up to bring a birthday present and stuff. And the radio's on, it's Mexican music and everybody's dancing and carrying on and having a great time. And all of a sudden,
they do know how to party.
Oh man, yeah, this house was hopping, bright, sunny summer day and everything. And I'm 4, just a little tiny thing. And I go in the house and I hear, the music, and all of a sudden the DJ comes on the radio and I hear the man talking. Now he's speaking Spanish, but I just knew that was a person in a room somewhere talking on a microphone, and that was how he's able to talk, through the radio.
World.
And I freaked out and it stopped the whole room. And I said, what is that? I got to do that. That's the radio. Where is that guy? I need to meet that guy. I mean, I threw a little fit and I never stopped talking about the radio. It drove people nuts.
Man, they're still going nuts, aren't they, today?
Well, apparently, yeah. It's never. You couldn't, from that moment, if there was a radio in the room, I would go to it and I would mess with the dials. I would just try to figure out what it was. And then if you asked me, what are you going to be when you grow up? I'd say, I'm going to be on the radio.
Radio Cuckoo, Radio Gaga, like that Queen song, huh?
Oh yeah, that's how it's always been. And from that age, like I said, if there was a stereo around, I would be playing with it, listening to it, trying to figure it out. I would sit there and figure out how to fade songs into one another. I would practice, announcing songs and stuff. I would listen to.
Oh wow, you got that advanced, that young. doing advanced things with sound then.
It just sort of continued and never really stopped. And I didn't care if all I had at my disposal was a Walkman. I would find a radio station. I would listen and study what.
God, a Walkman. Oh my God, I haven't seen one of them in years.
Yeah, I know. Remember the double deck tape players? Remember that?
Yeah. Oh, no kidding.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God. It made me feel old, but it wasn't that long ago. It's just advanced so much.
Yeah, now it's amazing. Everything is a digital file, but back then, well, also, here, I'll make you feel old. Do you remember those rack stereo systems that we used to have that came with everything? It'd come with a record player, a radio, CD player.
The custom, the wood kind with nice embroidery on it and all that.
Yeah, like Pioneer or Sony or something.
Yeah.
Kenwood, what we always had. So I figured out using one of those how to fade by using the volume dial one song into another, and I was just all kinds of impressed with myself. So I would sit in my room. My mom got tired of it. She's like, you can't do this in the living room anymore. It's driving me nuts. So she gave me the whole rack stereo, put it in my tiny bedroom, and I would sit in there and practice doing what I thought was a radio show. My interpretation of a music radio show. And I would have little clips. I remember I had little clips from Spinal Tap I would play in between songs, and I would get little clips of like rock stars talking, little sound bite. I'd play that like right before their song, and I'd just sit there and have a ball, man, all by myself doing this, and kept myself kind of company doing that for the longest time. Yeah, music and radio have always been a real love that I've always had for as long as I can remember.
Well, you definitely, it was meant to be, and, that was a sign then. You were being prepped. What do you call it, God or the divine universe, or, going where you feel led, or, I mean, that's, to me, that's what that is. You were being shown of yourself. Well, look where we're at now. That's amazing. And then you get that call.
Exactly right. I mean, and, I remember telling my dad at one of those, times we were having quality time at the Percos or what have you. Right. And he's going, I was a teenager, and he asks me again, so what is it that you want to do? Pretty soon, few years, you're going to be out of high school. What are you going to do? I said, Dad, I just really want to be on the radio. And I'll never forget it, because after we completed the sale on this house, after Art finished selling me this house, I told him the story, but my dad said to me, there's no money in radio. You need to be like a nurse or an accountant or something.
Tell that to Howard Cosell.
Oh,
and Wolfman Jack, baby.
Right. No, exactly. Tell that to Art Bell or Larry King.
Well, yeah, definitely later on. Right.
Tell that to Rush Limbaugh. I don't think he's hurting.
Yeah.
So it really crushed me that my father, because he's a businessman, right? Of all the people in my family.
What a way to crush my dreams, Dad. Thank you very much.
Dad got it the most together of anybody in my life that I'm exposed to. And here he's telling me, no, you cannot do this. So it just got crushed, and I internalized it then, and I made it sort of my private thing, my private kind of love. I told myself.
Well, do you think it could have been the mentality of him thinking, well, let's play psychology here. Daughters don't do what their dads tell them.
Well, maybe. Think about it. He's an Asian businessman. He wants his kids to have, a reliable income. That's what they want. That's why he told me to be an accountant.
That's understandable, right?
Check that way. And I'm just like, but Dad, want to some fun. I want to get on the radio. And mind you, I had not heard of this guy, Art Bell, yet in my life. Right. I just knew that I had to do this radio thing. And I would collect music, and I would collect material, and I would answer ads in the paper for DJ jobs and stuff like this. And nobody took me serious, of course. And it just, I kept teaching myself though. I kept studying audio. I kept studying audio equipment and other radio presenters. And then a few years go by, and I did hear Art Bell on the radio. And it was the second interview that he had ever done with Father Malachi Martin in about 1996, if I remember right. So, what a show.
Right.
What a hell of a show to be your first time, listening to Art Bell. And it really just made such an impression on me. I was thinking to myself, you mean you don't have to do news and sports and music? You can do other things with radio? Look at this guy. Look what he's doing. I kind of lost it. Wow. And I listened to him night after night after night, and it just sort of kept me company. And then I started to realize how popular this guy was. He had millions and millions of listeners, and I thought I just would always listen to his show. It didn't matter to me who was on. It didn't matter to me what they were talking about. I was going to turn on and listen to Art. And I just started to study him. I just started to sort of, listen very carefully at how he handles situations.
Well, he does have a hypnotic, I started listening to him in 98 when I got involved with this Morris crap, but he does have that hypnotic type, you could be a monkey and follow him because he's articulate. He was very articulate. Yeah. And I enjoyed that. And then with certain guests on and how he would handle them and the way he would crack at them, in a subtle way, but not to offend them. But it was fun. I don't know. He was just funny.
Yeah. And he was kind of, real. He was like a real person, not this sort of polished host that's kind of above the rest of us little people. He was
like gleamy, sparkly teeth, twing.
Yeah. He was real and a cool guy. And I really gravitated to that. And I just thought it was so cool. And, having a chaotic life, I've had, oh my gosh, I've roadied for fun. I've gone from job to job, as we all have, trying to find, where in the world do I fit in this world? Right. And I've had, relationships that go south like we all have. I've sort of, what we do, I think, is we're trying always to have a life, and it doesn't always work out. And sometimes we have to try again and again. And I know there's people out there listening that will relate to this. I have tried to build a life and lost everything I had, at least 4 times in my life so far. So those kind of things happen, and they wear on you, and they're chaotic. And Art's show was something that was constant. It was something that was always there. We just had this, big old thing that happened because I went on a show September 11th. I remember when September 11th actually happened, the day of, in 2001. Yeah. And I remember my mom kicked me out of the house that day. And I remember taking off, and I went someplace, and I just kind of parked the car, and I turned on Art's show. And there he was, taking calls. There he was with, all I was looking for at home was, my God, have you guys seen the news? Did you see what happened? And they're like, well, we got to talk, and you got to go, and all this stuff. And so there was Art, and it was just something constant in a life that really has been a lot of uncertainty, like a lot of us have had, and frightening. It can be frightening to be by yourself out there in the big bad world. And Art was somehow really comforting, and people don't know this. People do not know this, Mars. They don't know this at all. But when I ended up moving to a little town called Eureka, California.
Eureka! That's actually a real thing.
Eureka, that's right. It is a real thing. And when I got there, I didn't know anybody. All I knew is I'm going to make a life here. And I didn't know
Eureka, yeah. No, but you must have been like, Eureka, oh my God. That would have been, that could be scary.
Well, especially when I figured out what county Eureka is in. That was a surprise, but kind of nice. So,
what county?
Humboldt.
Ah!
I discovered, this is Humboldt County. Oh, so that was...
Yeah, what are those big green trees with the pretty flowers?
Is everybody just so friendly out here? I really love living here, but I really didn't have any close friends. I had I had my job. I got a job right away working there. I got a house, got a car, took care of all that. But in my personal life, there was no one that I really trusted. And as you know, we all need, someone to talk to. We're all social animals.
And trust.
And this is going to probably sound a little crazy. I've told maybe a couple friends. It's not really relevant, but you're asking, who the hell are you? And how how did you get hooked up with art and all this stuff, and how does all this happen? So the only person that I could think of to talk to was Art Bell, because I thought to myself, and this is about
the guy you got to know, obviously, so that's logical.
Kept me company, and this is about 2004 ish, and I needed someone just to write to, and I thought to myself, he's got that MindSpring email address. I bet.
Oh God, I remember that.
Right, remember Art Bell at mindspring.com, and I thought to myself, I bet I could type emails to that address, and they would just go into the ether and no one would ever know, and he'll never read it, right? But it'll make me feel like I got a friend and I can write to Art Bell. So I did this. Nobody knows. I've never confessed this to anybody. So I used to write all the time. I'd spill my guts. I'd just talk as if I was talking to a friend. So today this happened and I had to change the oil in my car and I think we need tires and blah, blah, blah. It made me feel like someone was in my life. And I did this for years, Mars. I did this for a long time. My God, up into 2012 or 13. And all of a sudden now there's activity on artbell.com, right? And I'd always thought to myself, he's not reading my emails. I never got a response. I never wanted one. Really.
There's so many, as you know. Oh my God. Now that you know what I mean?
I counted on my emails getting lost is what I counted on. He's got all these thousands and thousands of people that email him. There's no way he's going to read my thing. It's just really for my own mental, I feel like I'm talking to somebody.
But it just goes to show, like I said earlier, I bet, Heather, if I'm right, he looks at everything.
Well, an odd thing happened. A strange thing happened that I never ever thought, would happen. So all of a sudden in 2012 or 13, there's activity on artbell.com. Oh, wow. Right. Is this what's going on here? He's starting to come back with his show on Sirius XM, Dark Matter. And I don't know why, I just got this hunch. And I have this drum music, and I thought, I was listening to it, and I thought, I wonder if Art would like this. I'm going to send it to him. I'm going to send him this song. It's called Thunder Drums. It's just this crazy drum song. It's got the thunder clap in it. It just sounds like something Art would, play on his show or something he would like.
Right.
So I scan it for viruses and everything. I send him this file and I put in the subject line real big, Art Bell, this song has got your name written all over it. And, I sent that to mindspring.com. Well, the next day I got a response. And all I saw was a response, and I had to go outside. I had to go outside and have a cigarette. Oh my God, he wrote something back. Oh Lord, what is he going to say? Stop emailing.
Can't wait to read it.
Restraining order against you. Will you please cut it out, for God's sake? I don't know you, And I was
Shorter.
And It was just one sentence. He said, wow, this is a cool song. Who does it? I might use it. And I wrote him back. Well, it's by Scott Fitzgerald, and it's an album called Thunder Drums. But I didn't know what he meant by use it. So then Dark Matter comes on the air. Oh, the second or third night Dark Matter was on the air, and here he plays the song as one of his bumpers. And again, I just lost it, chills and everything. And honest to God, I would have been satisfied with that. Just that. And here I am telling you this story from...
You impacted the show at that early time.
Well, you could think of it that way. It's very strange to be telling you this story using this headset, sitting at this desk from this chair. I have chills all over me right now. And you guys probably think, wow, I didn't know all this stuff and this is an amazing story. You still don't even know the half of it. Don't even know that. But do you have a break coming up?
So we're back again. We're back with Heather Wade. And Heather Wade, I'd like to get the other half of that story.
There's a part of my life that nobody out there knows about. I have never told this simply because, some things are private.
Opening up book of secrets, people.
I am going to tell this now because anybody out there thinks they can knock me down into the dirt. They have no idea. I have been knocked down as far as a person can be knocked down already multiple times in my life, and I've come back from that. I have come back from far worse than anybody in talk radio is going to be able to come up with. And I want to tell that if I could.
Yes.
Because it led up to this. If this thing had not happened, if this horrible, random event had not happened right when it did, I would not be sitting here. And it's strange with synchronicity because, and serendipity, odd events can happen and you're thinking, why me? Just why me? And then years later, you finally realize, my God, I wouldn't be here if that and that and that had not happened to me in that order.
Oh, I can relate to that in a lot of ways, and you're right. And go ahead.
Saying, yes, I'm sure it also applies to you in your life. I mean, you're a fascinating individual with a very interesting life, and I'm sure if events had not taken place in the way that they had, whether we like those events or not, we would not be sharing this moment together. All of us, every single one of us, the listeners, me, you, the engineers, the whole lot of us. So what happened to me? In 2005, in my life, I was living in Eureka, and I wasn't doing too good. The dealership that I had worked at went through a buy-sell. And when that happened, the new owner come in and he got rid of all the existing staff and he brought in his new staff. And that dealership was a big family, a lot like we are, a big, huge family. And of course, here comes the money and it, scattered us all to the winds. And we're all sort of looking for jobs. I had been looking for jobs and not doing too well. I ended up working at good old Labor Ready. And
I hate those places.
I know, right? But you got to pay the bills. You got to eat. And I don't ask, people for favors. I do for myself. So, and I don't complain. You just do what you got to do. So I was doing that, and a friend of mine was like, it's been a hell of a summer for you. You want to go to Ozfest with me? I was like, well, yeah, I want to go to Ozfest.
So, who wouldn't?
Yeah, I go, and there was a great surprise because we didn't even know Iron Maiden was going to be there, and we were all, had a great old time. Well, I met a guy there at Ozfest. He was a security officer at the event. And his name, do you allow last names on your program? Well, I
don't mind. It is what it is.
No, what I'm about to say is libelous, so I'm not going to use his name. But okay, so, let's call him Jim. How about that? We'll just call him Jim. So I met Jim at Ozfest, summer 05. And we became friends. And turns out he was a truck driver, and he drove truck. He hauled equipment for big concert events around the country. And as I told you, one of my things that I used to do is I used to roadie kind of for fun to get into concerts for free. And that kept me
hell yeah. Stagecraft. I used to watch Stagecraft, so you're familiar with all them too.
Yeah, well, it was just it was a way for me to learn more about audio, and it was also a way to get into concerts for free and not be a groupie.
Right.
So I would I would hang out with the sound engineer and kind of try to pick their brain and learn from them. But so that was a hobby of mine, and Jim knew that as we got to know each other over a few months, and all of a sudden he says, "Hey, I work for Upstaging, this company, Upstaging. By the way, that is the real company. I'm not making that part up. I'm not changing that part." And he says, we've got all kinds of stage hands and we need reliable people. You're reliable. I mean, if you can clean those hotel rooms at Labor Ready, you can do this, right? It's a lot better money.
Set up, tear down. Yep, free concerts, free food, anywhere you want, walk, the floor, everything. If that's what you're referring to, it sounds like it.
Yeah, you get a nice laminated pass and all that good stuff. And so anyways, I went for it. And he goes, well, I'm going to buy you a ticket. The tour's in Boston right now. So he bought me a plane ticket. And I flew from Eureka to Boston, and I got my suitcase packed, and I'm all excited. Oh, my life's going to change. It's going to be great. And he opens up the door to the semi-truck, big red semi-truck, and he grabbed my arm that was not holding on to my suitcase. It was my right hand. I was holding on to my suitcase, and I was waving to him, and he grabbed my arm and yanked me inside the truck so hard, suitcase and all, that I hit the back wall of the sleeper of the truck. And I fell. Oh, you haven't even heard anything. I fell on the bed part, and then I heard this giant zipper go down, and he used an expletive, and he said, "You get the blank down and shut up." And I went, "Oh God, now what's going on?" And the trucks I'm in a row of trucks, all these trucks, and they're all going inside the venue, inside this gigantic.
Right, and trucks are running and all that, muffled noise.
Yeah, and so we all kind of go inside this building, and he gets out of the truck, and I heard the door lock, and I went, okay, now what's happening? Well, what was happening is that he kidnapped me. I was in that truck for 3 weeks. Mars. I was in that for 3 weeks. 3 weeks.
Oh my God.
He did not let me out. I only ate when he allowed me to eat. I only drank when he allowed me to drink. I only went to the bathroom when he allowed me to go to the bathroom. He had a pistol. He also had a knife. He would even threaten me with a screwdriver. This was an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
Worse than anything. If you have children or anybody listening to this program right now has a daughter, imagine all the things in your nightmares that you would never ever want to happen to your daughter.
Oh yeah.
Okay. This guy is the scum of the earth. In fact, I'll tell you how bad it is. He wanted me to help him get more girls in his truck, and I wouldn't do it. And he would send me I remember going into the Port Authority, this bathroom, and he said,
wait a minute. He let you out? I would have been like, yeah, I'll bring back 5 of them. See ya, sucker.
Well, he made sure I was never out of his sight. And he had a pistol in his pocket. And if you move or if you say anything, I'm going to shoot you. He was a former cop. So he sent me to this Port Authority bathroom, and he says, "You see the girl with the backpack? You see her going in? Go on in and talk to her," because he told me himself. He says, "Well, you will have so much better luck at this than I will. They'll trust a female. They won't trust me, but you can get them in the truck." And I said, "No, I won't." So I would go follow the girl into the bathroom, and I would wait for her to do her business and leave. And then I would go back out to him, and he'd say, "Where's the girl?" And I go, I don't know. She left." And he would then take me into the truck and beat the hell out of me. So then he starts talking about a white girl like you is worth a lot in Thailand. And I started.
I'll be back in 10 minutes.
Really scared because this was a very frightening situation. I kept thinking to myself, this cannot be real. Day after day, this cannot be real, Mars. Oh my God, is this actually happening to me? Am I going to live through this? What's he going to do tomorrow?
That's part of the mental abuse and the control factor, in a way, brainwashing through fear.
Oh, bad, really bad, but it never took, you see. I guess I'm a little too willful, as JC liked to tell me. So,
that's right.
So I don't know how much time I want to take telling it, but let's just say I did plan my escape, and I escaped that man. All on my own. I had one shot to do it, and I did it. I stole his car to do it. But I did, and I escaped in Philadelphia. We went across several states. I escaped from Philadelphia, and I drove almost 4 days straight. I slept very little, and I drove clear across the country back to Eureka, handled the stolen car. I actually had my friend who had the dealership by a used car lot. I said, "You can sign this car. Here's the keys. Here's the guy's name. You can sign this stupid thing and mail him a check." And we did. That's exactly what we did. And so, you
He's
know,
probably like, at least he sent back a check for money for the car. That's messed up. That's messed up.
Well, you know, I called the police and there was detectives and there was this and there was that and everything. But, you know, I had to, well, number one, get out of that situation. I had to come home. I got home. Miracle of miracles. That it was, I'm telling you, it was just by the skin of my fingernails that I made it through that, Mars. And I got home and I told myself, okay, that's over with. We're going to get back to our life, right? And I didn't know that any person who has their life threatened can come down with PTSD. I didn't know that. And all these strange things started to happen to me. And I didn't know what it was. Well, I was developing PTSD. I didn't know it. I thought you can just go through anything and get right back to your life. So I was, you know, working and doing all this, and due to PTSD.
Well, it's a transition.
Yeah.
Just like healing, which you didn't get a chance to do.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, at that time when you came back, you know.
Yeah. So I ended up figuring it out, right? But I ended up then going through a bunch of jobs and all this and having kind of a hard time. And then I found myself without work and in a really tough time. And I, you know, was not eating. I was kind of suffering, not doing very well at all. And I went hungry, really hungry for a good 3 months or so. And I ended up in the hospital because of that. And I had a near-death experience. And people that have listened to my show regularly, they've heard in detail about my near-death experience. I just didn't know what took place before it. So I had this near-death experience, and then I come out of that, and I'm healing from that. I had this very traumatic surgery to save me. I pretty much died. And I'm sitting at home.
Pretty much died while near-death experience.
Yeah. I was gone for almost 5 minutes. And so I'm sitting at home and I'm contemplating the near-death experience. I'm just laying there. I'm trying to think about life and what is next. And I don't know if you've ever had this happen to you, Mars, but I heard this internal voice. It's not even really a voice. It's almost a feeling.
It's subliminal, like a telepathic voice, not audible.
It is. It's not entirely audible. And it was saying to me, go south. You've got to go south.
Mine was telling me, punch through that ice.
Punch through the ice. Well, this voice grew in volume day after day after day. And then pretty soon it was shouting at me and screaming at me. And it was telling me, if you don't go south, it's not going to happen. And I'm thinking, well, what is it possibly going to happen for you? You know, nobody would care if I disappeared right now. Honest to God, it's fine.
Eureka.
I'm just done. It's okay if I'm done. And this voice is like, no, you are not. There's a thing. You have to go south. You got to go south or it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Oh, wait a minute. Let me get this straight because to you, you're conscious yourself, you know, but you got to go south. I mean, they're telling you, get back down inside. Yourself?
Yeah, I didn't know what to make of it. No, the voice was saying you get in a car and you drive.
Oh, okay. I thought like get back south, meaning get back in your body.
No, this was literal. Get in a car and drive south.
Wow.
And that was it. There was nothing else. It wasn't like, oh, you're going to end up on the radio or something good's going to happen to you. I had no idea, you know.
Right. You just had a nudge.
Yeah, and then I kind of, some things that I saw up in Eureka kind of told me, you know, this is it. I'm not getting anywhere here. I'm going to listen to this voice. I know how crazy it is. I mean, I've lived in this house for 10 years. I've made my life here. I've got kind of friends, some.
Yeah, after everything you've been through, yeah, why not? You know, boom. What else have you got to lose?
I'm going to pick up and just leave everything I own in this house. Well, I guess that's what we're doing. So I called Enterprise Rent-A-Car and I rented a car. I grabbed the cat, the laptop, and the birth certificate and just drove south and finally got to a little town. And I said, okay, we'll get an apartment here. So I did. I knew I could get an apartment there. It was Merced, Central Valley, California. And I got an apartment there. And started once again to listen to Art Bell and write him, of course. And it was in that apartment that he emailed me back saying, hey, yeah, I like that song, Thunder Drums. And then, you know, I'm not saying that was great living there. I had to teach myself to walk again, Mars. I could not walk.
Oh,
And
is that bad too?
you know how I did that? After the surgery, what I had was an upper abdominal resection because my small intestine had necrotized about a foot, 12 inches. So they had to...
Necrotized.
Yeah, what that means is they have to cut me open, take all my guts out, take out the bad part, put it back together, shove all your
Oh
guts
my God, really? They
Yeah.
had to cut and splice.
All of it. Your whole guts are out. They put you back together. They shove it all
That
back
must have
inside.
sucked. I'm sorry.
22 staples later, and I figured out real quick that when they do that to you, you now have to learn to walk again. Apparently your abs, Mars, are important for walking.
Yeah.
So I learn how to walk. And you know how I did that? I did not have physical therapy. I did not have insurance. I didn't have any of that stuff. No, I got up and I would get out in the hot summer heat and I would walk until I passed out.
Or puked. Right. Right.
And then I'd sit on the sidewalk, and if that was just a block
Make
long,
the muscles work. That's logical too. You force those muscles to work. As much pain that you might be in. Hey, every step is like this show. It's one show at a time. One step at a time. Wow, Heather. Wow.
And it took months. It took 3 months to be able to walk again like a normal person, just with your hands by your side and walking like a normal person. I mean, it took days and days of getting out there. And when I hit a mile, oh man, oh God, that was really a big deal. I walked an actual mile and just passed out practically. I started to black out. I went, sat down on the sidewalk, and that's when I knew, we can recover from this. It's going to be okay. And, like I said,
tomorrow will be 1 mile and 10 feet. The next day will be a mile and a half or something. Right.
Pretty soon I worked all the way up to 10 miles. And then I thought, gosh, I know what I'm going to do now. I'm doing
I just felt like walking.
In my life, I'm gonna change apartments. I'm gonna get a better apartment. Oh God. So I moved to this other apartment that turned out to be awful. Just awful. I hated it so bad. This was a huge mistake. So then, because it was this awful place, I decided to just throw myself into my work. And I made the decision then, you know what, I'm gonna try right now in my life, right now, in this crappy apartment. You know what? I'm gonna get into radio. I'm gonna try. Even if I end up just sort of playing around, maybe I'll end up doing a podcast or something. I don't know. You know what? I'm gonna go for it and see what happens. And I ended up doing a 5-minute news segment on a little show called the Fret Files. I did that. And then a guy heard that and he goes, hey, I heard you on that other podcast. You want to do something on our show? And I said, sure, why not? And so I did that. I co-hosted with 3 other guys on a podcast.
You were pointed to your destiny in radio.
Well, it turns out that little podcast had a very special listener in its audience, Mars. One guy named Art Bell. And he heard that, and he heard me. Now, I only found this out the day that Art passed away. Erin told me something incredibly sweet, that I had not known before, and bless her heart. I mean, she is a sweet, sweet, intelligent lady. And when she gave me the news that Art passed away, I, of course, lost my mind, as I usually do.
Right, and you're bounced back, and you're strong. You're going to be stronger than ever. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, but she says this. She says, do you know that little show that you used to do? And through my tears, I'm saying, yeah, I remember that little show I used to do. And she goes, Art used to take me into his computer room when you were on, and he would make me listen to you with him. And he would tell me, that's the one. Do you hear her? I can teach her. Now, I had no idea that was going on at the time. I had no idea. But that is really how all this got started. He heard me on accident on this little show. And then he told Erin, well, how do I get a hold of her? And then those guys that I was co-hosting with on that show, they started to tell me, you know what you ought to do? You ought to interview Art Bell. And I said, nah, come on, I can't do that. No. Well, I eventually emailed Art after being, beat up enough by those guys. Did you email him yet? Have you written to him yet? Come on. So I sent him an email and he messages me back. Hey, yes, I'll do an interview with you. Here's my phone number. Why don't you call me? And I
Wow.
went, what? So I told the guys, well, great, thanks, guys. I don't know how to do an interview. Now how are we going to pull this off? And so I call Art the next day. And I told him, he goes, when are you going to call? And I said, well, I got a day job, but look, I got a break and I can call you between 2 and 2:05 p.m. And he's like, damn, that's a tight time window, but okay. Well, I call him at 2:01 on the nose, and we start talking, and he asked me, have you done anything in radio? And I said, I'll be perfectly honest with you, sir. I am a nobody. I've done nothing but a couple things. I told him what I'd done. And I said I don't even know if I have the voice for it, let alone the skills. Or isn't there an entire skill set that goes with this? And he says, you have a fantastic broadcast voice.
I think you do. It's understandable, articulate.
I didn't know what to think. I'd never had anybody tell me anything like that before. I mean, I had my dad tell me, no, do radio. You're not going to get anywhere in radio. And here's Mr. Radio, himself. And he says, no, you could probably do this. I never had anybody ever even think about that in regard to my voice. I mean, it's kind of like you wanted to be an astronaut all your life, and NASA calls you up and says, actually, you've got what it takes to be an astronaut.
Right stuff
to me. Just unbelievable. And then we talked. We did the interview. We did that interview on July 11th, 2015. I'll never forget. And one take, 54 minutes, had a great time, and we were just friends from the start. It was very strange. Have you ever met somebody like that? It's almost like you've already known them for 25, 30 years. It was like that.
I'll decline to answer that, but yeah. Interesting.
Meaning you know someone like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting then. So, wow, again, go south. And when you go south, that's when all this unfolds.
Yes, and I really think that if all the events hadn't happened in the order they happened, in the way they happened, when they happened, I don't think that any of this would have took place, because as stupid and crazy and sort of banal as it sounds, it was that crappy apartment. That place was so awful that it got me to think about, what am I doing in my life? And am I ever going to try for this thing, or am I just going to whine about it? Am I going to whine about it all my life? Oh, well, this is what I wanted to do and I was never able to do it. No, I'm going to try to do this. And it started to happen. When Art called and he asked, would I produce for him? I told him I've never produced before. I don't know what I'm doing.
Wow. Would you produce for me? Not, well, hey, let's, do an interview. I mean, hop on the board.
Yes, yeah, and I said, that's a lot of trust for someone who's never produced a radio show in her life, and he says, oh, well, I trust you. And I thought, my God, if I can produce for him, I thought it would end there. And it did not. It turned into actually,
what are you doing tomorrow?
Yeah.
Right.
If anybody thinks with all of that history that I'm just going to tuck tail and run, that, boy, they don't know me very well.
Especially